Maddie was planning to give his daughter a bath, but he accidentally fell asleep. His hand slipped, and the child fell into the water. Seeing his daughter about to drown, Maddie suddenly woke up and quickly picked her up. The baby was so scared that she cried uncontrollably. Maddie was terrified. If she had been a few seconds later, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Fortunately, she discovered it in time, and the child was unharmed. The incident should have ended there, but upon seeing her adorable daughter, Maddie suddenly made a painful decision. When her husband, Owen, returned home from work, he found that his wife and daughter were missing. As he searched everywhere, he suddenly received a call from Captain Athena. He rushed to the fire station and only saw his daughter, but his wife, Maddie, was nowhere to be found. A colleague handed Owen a tablet, saying it was left by Maddie. Upon seeing the video, he broke down. Maddie said, "Don't call the police or look for me. I'm not a good mother. I know they'll take care of her." His wife's sudden departure left Owen heartbroken. He had no idea what had happened. In the days that followed, he studied the video repeatedly, suspecting that his wife had been coerced and hoping to find clues in the video. His younger brother-in-law, Buck, didn't think much of it. He believed he knew his sister well and thought that Maddie tended to avoid problems and might come back after a while. But Owen couldn't listen to him. He was convinced that his wife was sending out distress signals. Buck thought his brother-in-law was overreacting and had become overly sensitive. Owen refused to give up. He tracked down the doctor who had treated his daughter and tried to inquire about Maddie's whereabouts. Though the doctor knew nothing, Owen poured out his emotions in a fit of agitation, as if only by doing so could he ease the pain in his heart. "I have to find her and talk to her," Owen kept repeating. He knew how difficult it must be for his wife to raise their child alone. As a firefighter, he was often absent, and he vented his emotions like a madman, not even aware of what he was saying. The doctor stood there helplessly. Though he understood Owen's feelings, he couldn't do anything to help. On the other side, Maddie came to the beach alone. Her hollow eyes were filled with self-blame. Since the baby was born, she had been living in constant fear. She had been so careful, yet she had almost let the child drown. At that moment, she only wanted to end her life. The cold seawater slowly engulfed her. Flashbacks of the past kept replaying in her mind: her parents' harsh scolding, her husband's disappointed gaze. She even imagined Owen accusing her of killing the child. These thoughts weighed heavily on her, making it hard to breathe, until she faintly heard the baby's cries. A mother's instinct drove her to struggle and surface. Her child was always her greatest concern. Ultimately, she chose to seek help from a psychologist. The doctor initially diagnosed her with postpartum depression and recommended hospitalization for observation. However, further tests revealed that she was suffering from postpartum thyroiditis, whose symptoms are similar to depression. Both conditions can cause insomnia, anxiety, and even suicidal thoughts. Upon learning the truth, Maddie felt a great sense of relief. Compared to her previous panic and confusion, she now at least knew the cause of her condition. Although treatment would take time, there was finally hope for recovery. On the other side, Owen still had no news of his wife. He insisted on sending Maddie emails every day, sharing the little moments of their baby's growth. Looking at his daughter's adorable face, his eyes were filled with tenderness. However, the accident had left a deep shadow on Maddie. Before she was fully recovered, she still didn't have the courage to go home. She could only keep watching the videos her husband sent her, listening to his words of longing. This became her greatest comfort during her treatment. As time passed, the baby grew up amid cries and tears. Owen applied for leave and became a full-time dad. He posted missing person flyers while taking the child to various hospitals, hoping to chance upon his wife. Friends urged him to find a job, as he had been without income for half a year. Through a friend's introduction, Owen took a temporary job as an emergency medical technician. However, this decision unexpectedly created an opportunity for him and his wife to reunite. That day, Maddie's best friend was drunk, and she was about to take her home when her friend suddenly choked on her vomit. She was about to suffocate when the ambulance Owen was in happened to pass by. Maddie was at a loss when she looked up and saw that it was her husband who had come to the rescue. Both of them stood there in shock. They never expected to meet again under such circumstances. Maddie was filled with fear. She was afraid that her husband would blame her for leaving without a word, but Owen didn't blame her at all. He just asked her why she hadn't contacted him. Maddie confessed that she had wanted to kill herself because she was afraid of hurting the baby. Only then did Owen truly understand the pressure his wife had been under. One was busy saving lives, while the other was busy raising a child. In their busy lives, they neglected each other's feelings, but their deep love taught them to be honest with each other and no longer avoid problems. Owen took his wife home. After months apart, the baby could already crawl. Maddie burst into tears. She felt guilty for missing every moment of her child's growth. Under Owen's encouragement, she softly hummed the lullaby she used to sing. The baby seemed to recognize his mother's voice, stopped crying immediately, and waved his little hands, rushing into his mother's arms. "She actually remembers my voice." Maddie couldn't believe it. Of course she does. Whether it's 6 months or 6 years, a child will never forget their mother. Every marriage goes through anxiety and confusion, and it's inevitable to overlook each other's feelings. But as long as you stay true to your original intentions and nurture the relationship with love and understanding, you will eventually achieve a happy family. Just as Maddie's family was reunited. On the other side of the city, a more dramatic marital crisis was unfolding on the rooftop. A wife who had been married for 30 years stood on the edge of the rooftop. She held a megaphone and shouted. This sudden commotion confused the onlookers. It turned out that she just wanted to get her husband's attention. At that moment, her husband Norman was buying breakfast at the corner. He had no idea what was happening.
Save me, Norman! Save me now!
The fire department quickly laid out an air cushion, but this move angered the wife. She turned around and pulled out a gun, shooting the air cushion to pieces. Then she pointed the gun at the firefighters who had come to rescue her. All the police officers at the scene immediately pointed their guns at her. I don't want to hurt anyone. I'm just tired of being ignored. Just as the situation was at a stalemate, Norman finally arrived at the scene, panting heavily. His wife cried, "You said you saw me, but your eyes were already looking right through me. You don't even remember who I am." Norman acted quickly, pulling out his phone and playing a song. It was the theme song from the movie they had watched on their first date. The wife burst into tears. It turned out her husband had always remembered. "What I saw was the girl talking by the bonfire on the beach. The girl who could drink 9 shots of tequila and still walk straight. The girl I will always love." The crowd erupted into applause. The wife finally smiled and walked down to embrace her husband tightly. Although she would be arrested for disturbing the peace, she didn't regret it at all, because she finally knew that her husband had never stopped loving her. Love in real life is never a straight line. We fall in love with the same person over and over again. As the sirens faded into the distance, the fire department received a new call, reporting that someone was stuck between 2 buildings. When the firefighters arrived at the scene, they recognized the man as George, the mall security guard. However, this man had been stuck there for 12 hours. Here's what happened. Last night, while on duty, George noticed a group of young thugs graffitiing the walls. He was about to arrest them, but the young men were agile and jumped to the neighboring building in a single leap. George thought, "What's so hard about that?" and jumped after them. Luckily, his beer belly kept him from falling, or he would have plummeted to his death. When the firefighters arrived, George told them his legs were completely numb, and worse, his bladder was about to burst. The firefighters tried to pull him up with a rope, but as soon as he lifted his hand, his body slid back down, and he let out a scream. The captain made a quick decision and led his team into the neighboring furniture store. They began smashing the wall while the store owner looked on in disbelief. "We're saving a man," the captain explained as he drilled holes to locate George. This nearly drilled a hole in George's leg. Once they found the right spot, the team worked together to smash a large enough hole directly beneath George's feet. The firefighters told George to take a deep breath and pull his stomach in. At the same time, everyone pulled with all their might and finally pulled George out. The firefighters joked that he should thank his beer belly. The rescue mission was just over, but the fire truck was ticketed. A war between departments was about to break out. The fire truck was ticketed by the traffic police while performing a rescue mission for blocking traffic. Captain Lance saw the ticket and looked utterly disbelieving, but he had no time to argue, because the sports car driver was still stuck on a billboard several stories high, waiting for rescue. After signing the ticket, Lance saw the traffic police officer's smug expression and couldn't hold back any longer. Finally erupting, Lance did what every driver wanted to do but dared not do. He slammed the ticket onto the hood of the police car. However, this bold move officially ignited the feud between the fire department and the police department. In fact, the police and firefighters in this city had been secretly competing with each other for a long time. The police believed that firefighters spent their days sleeping, eating, and playing games at the fire station, and occasionally even used the fire pole as a toy. Meanwhile, the firefighters thought the police were simply jealous, as firefighters always saved lives and received applause from the public when they responded to emergencies. However, the police were always criticized for their inefficiency, and this psychological disparity caused the conflict between the two sides to escalate. Sure enough, the police retaliated the next day. When the firefighters came out of a coffee shop after buying coffee, they were shocked to find their fire truck being towed away. The police even issued a new ticket, claiming that the fire truck was parked illegally in the fire lane. This move enraged the entire fire department. After retrieving the fire truck, they discovered that the vehicle was covered in scratches, clearly the result of deliberate vandalism. That evening, Captain Lance gathered all the firefighters and announced that they would formally declare war on the police department. However, their plan for revenge was to have a friendly baseball game with the police, to get a better understanding of their opponents. Lance secretly went to watch the police team train. He was shocked by what he saw. Chief Bobby was a hidden softball prodigy. What made Lance even more devastated was that Bobby was the undefeated captain of the local police department's all-star team. Lance felt that victory was unlikely, but they had to win this game. So the crew came up with a plan. They poached a genius player named Pete from the neighboring fire department, who had a batting average of 550. But Pete took advantage of the situation and demanded a pay raise, fuel subsidies, weekends off, and 3 extra days off each month. Lance was furious, but for the sake of victory, He had no choice but to agree. On the day of the game, Pete was late, forcing the fire department to take the field first. They were soundly defeated by Bobby's team, trailing 0-6 within the first 5 minutes. Just when all hope was lost, Pete finally arrived. It turned out he had been intentionally pulled over by a traffic cop on the way. Lance was furious. He never imagined Bobby would stoop so low. Pete, who had changed into his uniform, turned the tide. He scored consecutive points, boosting the team's morale. Under his leadership, even the weakest players performed beyond their capabilities, and the score quickly tied. At the decisive moment, the police team resorted to underhanded tactics again. They deliberately tripped the firefighters and then blamed them for falling on their own. Seeing that a brawl was about to break out, Lance suppressed his anger and suggested ending the game in a draw. Unexpectedly, Bobby mocked them, saying, "It seems that you firefighters are only good enough to shine our shoes." This completely enraged the firefighters, and both sides started a full-scale fight on the field. This feud was now set in stone. However, at the gas station on the corner, a robber was facing the most terrifying opponent of his career. Don't mess with women at gas stations. But the robber refused to listen to his threats. He demanded that Kate hand over her wallet or he would empty his magazine. But Kate wasn't intimidated at all. The robber was stunned. "Can't you see the gun in my hand?" he shouted. To his surprise, Kate not only wasn't afraid but burst into laughter. Enraged, the robber was about to attack, but Kate grabbed the gas nozzle and sprayed him. The robber was completely stunned. His first robbery, and he ran into such a crazy woman. But there was more to come. Kate poured gasoline all over herself and took a stance as if she was ready to die with him. "How about it? Are you scared now?" At the last moment, the gas station attendant saw this on the surveillance camera, grabbed a fire extinguisher, and rushed out to ask Kate to put down the lighter. This is a gas station, after all. After the gas station attendant persuaded her, Kate finally put away the lighter. "I thought that was the end of it." But she suddenly grabbed the gas gun again and sprayed the robber to the ground. The gas station attendant was stunned. The robber cursed and tried to get up, but the attendant raised the fire extinguisher and sprayed him again. Soon, the police and firefighters arrived at the scene. The firefighters were giving the robber, who was covered in gasoline, a shower. The guy was shivering uncontrollably. It seemed he wouldn't dare rob anyone again. But the ordeal wasn't over yet. The command center received another call reporting that a woman was threatening to jump off a building. It was Kate, the same woman from the gas station. At that moment, she was standing on top of a 100-meter-high water tower. If she fell, she would die for sure. The police tried to calm her down, but there were too many obstacles below the tower to set up an airbag. The dispatcher attempted to reassure Kate over the phone, but she said she was a monster who felt no fear toward anything, including death. When fear no longer exists, your heart becomes utterly empty. The team doctor, Henry, suspected she had a strange illness. Normal people couldn't possibly feel no fear. Kate said that everyone in her life thought she was crazy, but no one cared if she was sick. At that moment, the female officer suddenly noticed something unusual around Kate's eyes, and her voice also sounded abnormal. Henry diagnosed it as Ulrich syndrome, a condition that causes vocal cord stiffness and affects the brain sphere perception area. Henry tells Kate that she's not crazy, just sick. But Kate doesn't believe him and thinks they're lying. She thinks that maybe only by jumping can she feel fear. Ignoring everyone's pleas, Kate tries to jump, but at the last moment, firefighter Buck grabs her from behind. This prevents a tragedy from happening. After the cause of her condition is identified, Kate can finally start a new life. At this moment, a highway surveillance camera captures a yellow sports car speeding wildly on a road with a speed limit of 60. It was going 120 miles per hour and showed no signs of slowing down. Police cars lying in wait on the side of the road quickly sounded their sirens and gave chase, but they couldn't catch up with the crazy sports car. At that moment, 15-year-old Tom was shaking with fear. It turned out that he had just secretly taken his father's limited edition sports car. However, he didn't expect the transmission to suddenly malfunction, causing the accelerator to stick and the brakes to fail. He cried and called 911 for help. The police immediately closed off the entire highway and contacted his father, Mike. Mike was furious when he heard the news. This vintage sports car was his pride and joy. He wouldn't even let himself drive it. However, the dispatcher informed Mike that Tom believed he loved the car more than himself and was afraid that his father would severely punish him if he admitted it. Therefore, Tom dared not confess voluntarily. After hearing this, Mike fell silent, realizing the severity of the situation. Mike arrived at the scene under police escort. He reassured his son over the phone, saying, "You are more important than any car." His father's warm words gradually calmed Tom down. He followed the dispatcher's instructions and kept his foot on the brake, but the speed could only be reduced to 80. Soon, a fire truck arrived to guide him, and finally, Tom followed the instructions, pulled the handbrake hard, and crashed into the fire truck to stop. Since the vintage sports car did not have airbags, Tom's head was severely injured when he hit the steering wheel. The rescue team quickly cut open the roof to extract him. Mike, who had arrived on the scene, gripped his son's hand tightly and trembled as he told him everything would be okay. Technicians inspected the vehicle and determined it was a mechanical failure in the transmission. When Tom, still weak, asked if the car could be repaired. Mike, with tears in his eyes, said, "Don't worry, I've already ordered you a Tesla." Meanwhile, firefighter Buck encountered a horrifying sight at the accident scene, a severed leg. Captain Bobby immediately realized that the female driver, Henrietta, had been lying. Henrietta said she hit a wild deer, but analysis at the scene suggested she had hit a person. It turned out that just moments earlier, a truck loaded with hay had collided with a small car. The fire department arrived at the scene after receiving the call. Truck driver Eddie said there were no other vehicles on the highway at the time. However, the driver of the sedan, Henrietta, seemed possessed. She suddenly swerved into his lane. Bobby instructed team member Chimney to first block off both lanes and prepare the fire extinguishers. The hay could catch fire at any moment. The team members then went to the front of the sedan to check on Henrietta. Henrietta told Bobby that a wild deer had suddenly darted out, and she had instinctively swerved, causing her to collide with the truck. Team member Hen checked Henrietta's injuries and found that her neck was broken. Team member Chimney quickly put a neck brace on her and told her not to move under any circumstances. But as soon as he finished speaking, it turned out that Henrietta was allergic to pollen, and the air was filled with pollen at that moment. This was a problem because every time she sneezed, the bone fragments would shift. Team member Hen told her to endure it at all costs. Otherwise, if she injured her spinal cord, the consequences would be unimaginable. But sneezing is something you can't control. At that moment, Bobby told her to say purple elephant. He said it was a method his grandmother taught him. As long as you say those 4 words, you can't sneeze. She had no choice but to try it, and to her surprise, it worked. This was amazing. The firefighters quickly removed the car door, lifted Henrietta out of the car, and rushed her to the hospital. However, just as the firefighters were preparing to pack up and leave, team member Eddie suddenly spotted a shoe in the grass. When he picked it up and took a closer look, he was stunned. It was clearly a foot, a freshly severed foot. Bobby finally realized that the wild deer Henrietta had mentioned was actually a person. But where was the person? Bobby immediately ordered everyone to conduct a thorough search. Meanwhile, team member Chimney recognized that the severed foot was wearing cycling shoes, so the owner of the foot must be a cyclist. Sure enough, not far from the severed foot, the team members found a bicycle in the grass. Shortly after, team member Eddie spotted a pool of blood in the grass. Following the trail of blood, they finally found the cyclist, Tom, under the dry grass. They pulled back the grass and immediately saw the severed leg still bleeding. Tom was in a deep coma with a weak pulse. The team members quickly applied a tourniquet to stop the bleeding. The intense pain suddenly woke Tom up. After some emergency treatment, Tom was temporarily out of danger and was rushed to the hospital. Just as things had calmed down, the alarm bells started ringing incessantly. Police officer Jack arrived at the scene to investigate, but the female homeowner, Sarah, looked panicked, her hands trembling uncontrollably. When Jack pushed open the bedroom door, he discovered a freezer inside. This was highly unusual. Who would place a freezer in a bedroom? His professional instincts immediately alerted him. According to the registration information, only a couple lived here. However, he still did not see the husband. Sarah stammered that her husband was on a business trip, which made the situation even more suspicious. The entire city was under lockdown due to the pandemic, and no one was allowed to leave. Jack gripped his gun tightly and slowly approached the freezer. He suddenly lifted the lid, only to find frozen food inside. Sarah explained that she had stockpiled food due to the lockdown. Suddenly, the alarm sounded again. Jack realized that the sensor had come loose, but as soon as he fixed it, it fell off again. Just then, he heard faint knocking sounds coming from inside the wall. Jack asked, "Where is your husband?" The fire department arrived at the scene and detected a heat source behind the wall. They immediately broke through the wall and found Mark, who was barely alive. He had been stabbed in the back and was on the brink of death due to blood loss and dehydration. Seeing this, Sarah coldly laughed and said, "He's still alive?" During the interrogation, Sarah finally confessed that the pandemic lockdown had put her divorce proceedings on hold. Mark, who was forced to live with her, began dividing the household belongings, even sawing a vase in half. Unable to endure it anymore, Sarah stabbed her husband with a dinner fork and walled him up. In the end, Mark was rushed to the emergency room, and Sarah was taken to prison. She never imagined that her plan would be foiled by a malfunctioning alarm system.